not know that they're physically there, but a lot of the effects and how they and
the neutrinos
what Terrence is trying to prove, I think, is that because the fact that you can't detect whether neutrinos are there or not, there must be another way in which they're powered. My argument to him is that to suggest that neutrinos don't exist, because we have a lot of evidence to not know that they're physically there, but a lot of the effects and how they interplay with other things, to suggest that they don't exist is not only to get rid of that small theory, but also quite a lot of other huge laws of physics.
Are they laws or are they ideas of physics?
Well, why don't you respond to that and talk about how a lot of people have that sort of narrow mindset? You talked about identity.
Yeah, the identity element. The things that make our math works. Like if I said to you, what's 1 times 1? What'd you say? 1? It equals 1? Now, what would Newton say is that? Action times an action. That's a reaction, right? Anybody in here that thinks 1 times 1 equals 1, then you give me 2 pounds and I'll give you a pound back. And we'll call that even, right? Because 1 times 1 equals...
Those are not equivalent.
1. An unbalanced equation. What we need to do is, the first thing in math is just...
All equations start off balanced.
To have a balanced equation. 1 times 1 equaling 1 is an unbalanced equation. But the identity element, which is like the Jim Crow laws of the 60s, they say that anything multiplied by 1 becomes that same number as itself. Well, the laws of physics has to break down in order for that to take place. Action and reaction for 1.
That is not correct. The laws of physics are constant. No amount of our opinion or our imaginative desires changes the laws of physics. That's why if I say a tree is a dog, the tree remains a tree. Our ability to describe things mathematically is only as relevant as our ability to eliminate our own personal bias, which is the foundation of science, which is the reason why I say science is a discipline. It does not care about your subjectivity of it. And I'll go into more detail in just a moment.
Times 1 to equal 1. In comparison to if I said, what's $1 times $1? Anybody know it's $1? Well, what's a dime times a dime, or 10 pence?
10 pence, yeah.
10 pence times 10 pence? That's a pound, right? 10 pence times 10 pence? Is that right, honey? What about 100 pence times 100 pence? That's a pound times a pound, right? That's $100, ain't it? What about a quarter? What about 4 quarters times 4 quarters? That's $1, right? That's a pound, right? Well, that's $4. Now, all of these things are legal. The banks can say $1 times $1 is $1 and give you that. Or the banks can say to a friend, $1 times $1 is a quarter times a quarter. It's 4 quarters times 4 quarters, and give that person $4. They can say to another person, $1 times $1 is 100 pence times 100 pence. That person gets $100. So that money is generated. And this is all legal. Do you think it's not happening in the banks? This is what 1 times 1 equaling 1 has got us. This inconsistency of our monies and our economy is sick.
Everything he just said mathematically was very consistent. And I'll explain in just a minute.
Being in the balance. And the rest of our future is sitting in the balance because our science has been stunted as a result of the problems in mathematics. Because math asks for the basic laws of physics to break down in order for 1 times 1 to equal 1. In order for 1 times 0 to equal nothing, laws of conservation of energy has to disappear. And math is the foundating laws of math is supposed to support the laws of physics. They are arm in arm. They cannot be in controversy with each other. So we need an audit on the Platonic solids. We need an audit on the square root of 2. And we need an audit on action and reaction. Or we either got to get rid of, we say 1 times 1 equals 1, and there's no action and reaction. One or the other. You can't have both. And until we make that change, we're in trouble. We're going to be stunted as a species.
Right. And I'll stop the video there. Now, off the top of my head, I'm gonna put more energy into making sure this is structured. Actually, you know what? I'm not, because what is the foundation of my 2 cents? No edit jobs. So what I'm gonna do, if YouTube will let me, come on YouTube. I need to escape.
Should we open up to questions from the
No,
audience?
I don't want to talk to them.
So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to bring up this. So real quick, because I know you guys are, if you're watching this to this point, you're like, well, everything he said makes sense. Just because something makes sense doesn't mean that it's empirically true. The ability to make you feel good does not also equate to something being right and justice and valid and truthful. That's kind of the reason why we struggle so much in society, because we're more prone as individuals and as entities to favor a sense of well-being versus basic logic. So because of that, and I don't want to focus on logic, I'm not going to get into that aspect of the human condition philosophically. What I am going to do is I'm going to touch on just 2 basic principles that he said. He stated that 1 times 1 equals 1, right? He said that 4 quarters equals $1, and that 4 quarters times 4 quarters equals $4, right? Those are things that he said. Now, the conflict basically is resolved. I resolved this conflict with why 1 plus 1 equals 2, the nature of numbers. Something fascinating happened when I did this. Something unexpected for me occurred when I did this. There actually only exists one number. There is only one empirically valid real number in existence. The quantity of numbers only exists as one value, and that value is 1. The numerical character 1 is the only actual real number that exists. No other value exists in math. And I'm going to explain all of that in just a second. But I want to explain why 4 quarters times 4 quarters gives you $4, whereas $1 times $1 gives you $1. And it's very simple. It's all semantic. 1 times 1 equals 1. 4 times 4 equals 16. For every division of $1, right, a numerical character of $1 is equal to the quantity of 100. So if you divide 100 by 4, you get the value 0.25, right? That still equals 1. If you divide the value of $4, which is equal to the numerical character of 100, if you divide 400 by 16, you get the numerical value of 0.25. So that's the reason why when you multiply 4 quarters, when you multiply 4 values of 0.25 by 4 values of 0.25, you get $4. Because 0.25 times 4 equals $1. That's the consistency of mathematics. Because you didn't start off, okay, let me try to keep it simple. You start off with 1 physical dollar bill, right? You start off with 4 physical quarters, right? You divide this one entity by itself and you get 1 instance of itself, $1. You times these 4, you times this one entity by itself and you get the constant of 1 entity of itself, which is $1. These 4 physical empirical entities, because we're speaking visually in our minds, we're saying that 0.25 should equal 1. And if we times that by 1, then we should get 0.25. But the reality is, the nature of it is I have 4 physical quarters sitting on the counter next to me. And I say, if I add 4 more instances of these quarters, if I take this 1 quarter and make 4 instances of it, what is the value of that? 4 times 4 is 16, and I only have 10 fingers. So therein lies the conflict when it comes to math. Because how do we express things like that with our limited 10-digit numerical system? 0, as he mentioned, is a non-existing value. 1 is an existing value. 1 is the only real natural number that exists in nature. Every numerical character is equal to x, and every x is a value that is defined by the order of operations, the associative, distributive, and cumulative laws of mathematics, which forms the foundation of arithmetic. These are the principles that you learn in kindergarten. Well, maybe not kindergarten, but as soon as you start learning math, these are the first principles that you learn. Everything that Terrence Howard did was a violation of the laws of mathematics to validate a principle. There are two basic numerical quantities: real numbers and imaginary numbers. Real numbers are the ones that the bank use. Imaginary numbers are the ones that investors use. Investors generate currency with imaginary numerical characters. That's where our economic system fails. But economics as a class of social science, because economics is not a mathematical class, it's a social science class. It has branches in mathematics, but nature doesn't deal with economics. So you can't say that, you can't compare the physics of quantum physics, quantum mechanics, real engineering, architecture. Architecture is the foundation that geometry is built on. The images that were drawn on paper were subjected to the nature and reality that a circle doesn't exist. So how can I apply this image to the physics of the world? How can I take this infinite volume that I'm illustrating? Because all you have to do if you draw a circle, all you have to do is say this circle is equal to the Earth. Obviously, the Earth's not that small, but it's relatively accurate. Those are imaginary images. Those are imaginary quantities that are used to deflect. The imaginary images are defined to reflect the real world application, the real world manifestation of them. So that's what we're dealing with. Everything that I think that what Terrence Howard is doing is valid. I am frustrated in life by the fact that when I, as an intelligent person, say, I like, one of the things I love to do as a person that is an empirical scientist, as I love to do work based on principles of power. And the principles of power, not the TV show, the principles of actual physical power. And what I mean by that is force over distance through time equals power. An object has every influence is a force. Every object that is moved is a byproduct of work. And so work is force over distance. So if I pick up something, I have to do work. The same amount of work, whether I pick this up or someone else picks it up or a machine picks this up, the same amount of work will have to be done on this object because its mass is constant. The speed at which I pick this up is power. Power translates into our society as labor. So the faster you can get things done, the more effective you can do labor. So labor is literally just a function of power over time. No, power over value is what labor would be. And what I mean by that is we get paid per hour. So if you know that you can pay, let's say you can make a light bulb in an hour. You know you can make one light bulb in an hour. Your labor cost is going to be based on how much money you pay the people making these light bulbs per hour. So the labor per hour will change based on that floating variable. Because I may be a asshole and take a bunch of people and club them over the head and say make this light bulb for free. So my labor cost is $0 per hour. The force, the work, and the power will all be the same values for this light bulb. But because I'm choosing to pay this particular individual less, then the labor is going to be affected by that. If I pay someone $10 an hour to make this light bulb, then my labor per hour for this bulb is going to be $10 an hour. And that's the foundation of economics, because there is no set numerical value associated with the numerical principles, the scientifically proven principles of physics. Another thing that applies is the actual amount of energy that goes into making a light bulb as a factor of power, because the process to make the bulb determines how much energy went into making the bulb. And what I mean by that is, it's the basic. What I can say is this: the argument between whether fossil fuels and electrical vehicles are better. Electric vehicles win every time if you apply the principles of force over distance through time. For the simple fact that if you ask someone how long did it take fossil fuels to get produced, they'll say, oh, well, you just go to the gas station and just fill up your tank. There's an entire industry dedicated to that. So the actual labor for producing fossil fuels does not reflect the actual amount of energy, the amount of force and work and power that went into that. Starting with the millions of years of industrial processing that the planet put into it just to get it into a state of crude oil. And then the energy required to go extract it out of, first you got to find it, then you have to extract it out of the ground, then you have to refine it, then you have to distribute it to the destination that it needs to go to be utilized by us. Then you have to pump it yourself into your vehicle. So all of that is applied to the force over distance through time, which is the amount of power required to make gasoline. That's how much energy goes into one tank of gas. Electricity, on the other hand, is freely floating. If you literally take a wire and move it through the air, because the Earth is a giant magnetic field, even though you can't detect it, you're actually generating electrical power. It's actually that simple. It's just the field of space, the electric field cutting through this room is so tiny that the amount of coils required to generate electricity from it will be equal to the size of the planet itself. But that doesn't mean that it's not valid. That does not take away from the fact that that principle actually applies. So I'm rambling. What I'm going to do is I actually have a structured, something structured. I'm trying to do that more now. It helps me stay focused because my life is super, super busy and super hectic. So if I don't do this, I can't make an episode of My 2 Cent because when I come with an idea, by the time I get home, it's gone. So now I write my ideas down. And since I'm doing that, I might as well just verbatim read them back. So I added Terrence Howard to the beginning of this My 2 Cent episode because listening to him talk, everything he's saying I believe is valid. Everything the direction he's going, in my opinion, is a valid one. Scientifically speaking, it's a valid one. But if he or anyone refuses to accept the principles of science, you're not going to be able to achieve your goal, because society influences scientific principles, but scientific principles don't change what they are based on what we think and how we feel. With me putting all this stuff out for inertial gravimetics and the idea that opposites repel and like charges attract, I might be wrong. But you know what's going to tell me? Nature. Not anyone else. Nature's going to tell me that I'm wrong. Right now, our science community says, well, we don't know this. We're not sure about that. Einstein's theory of general relativity is a theory of general relativity. It's a theory that describes gravity. It makes predictions that show equality. But if you think about it, all of the principles of electromagnetism that describe the properties of electricity and magnetism and chemistry, those three are intertwined and have a very intimate relationship. The ideas and principles that were written by the individual authors that created that stuff, those principles based on their observation in nature, were able to apply that to the field of they were able to apply it to the field of electrical science, right? So everything that we have that deals with electricity, electronics, power generation, space exploration, automated systems, fly-by-wire technology, holographic technology, all that stuff, it all is applicable to the principles that they wrote. So if Einstein's general relativity, which was written 100 years ago, accurately describes gravitation, the science community has to explain why we don't have anti-gravity technology. And since they can't, I'm going to put my own theory out there. Because 100 years from now, my theory might be correct. I'll be gone and dead, but 100 years from now, maybe I'm right. And maybe as individuals in society, our collective ideas, which was what built the foundation of electromagnetism, is what's more important than whether or not we are or not right. Maybe that's more important than us being right instead of us being wrong. Maybe Terrence Howard is putting out information that isn't accurate, but it's valid enough to move us in a direction that will get us to anti-gravity and flying cars. So My gripe with him is 1 plus 1 equals 2. That for me, that will always be a trigger. If you want to trigger me, just tell me that 1 plus 1 equals anything other than 2, because it is not. That is not the case. And like I always say, if you have an issue with what I'm saying, prove it. So I'm going to give you the foundation that you can use to prove to me that 1 plus 1 equals anything other than 2. Why does 1 plus 1 equal 2? The nature of a number. In mathematics, a number is a mathematical object. A mathematical object is an abstract object arising in math. Abstract object is a principal Abstract objects is a principal philosophy which deals with the nature and relationship between abstraction and concreteness, whereas abstraction asserts that an object is fictitious and unreal. Concreteness asserts that an object is non-fictitious and real, whereas real implies empirical and unreal implies imaginative. For the sake of ambiguity, and in the context of this writing, real and imaginary are dualistic qualities, equal and opposite at the most basic and simplest of terms. What I mean by that is, so that there won't be no argument, at the most basic, lowest common denominator of imaginary and real, they are the opposite of each other. So if you say, well, how can you prove that something is real? You can prove that something is real because it's the opposite of something that's imaginary. Well, can you prove something is imaginary? You can prove that something is imaginary if it's the opposite of real. Well, isn't that circular? Yes. But if I hold up a cup, is my cup more real than your imaginary cup in your head? Which one's more real? Okay, so that's how that's going to work. In my 2 cents, a number is simplified to its most basic and quintessential properties. A number is an axiom set of equalities derived from the operation of its operands, associated with the principles of the law, the operation law, the associative law, the cumulative law, and the distributive law. The operation law is the order of operations. In my 2 cents mathematics, the order of operations, please excuse my daring sounding, PEMDAS, whatever you want to call it, is the operation law. Because I think our inability to objectively use this principle is why we get to places where 1 plus 1 equals anything other than 2. In my 2 cents mathematics, the associative, cumulative, and distributive properties are laws whose applications with the context of operation give rise to real numbers. In my 2 cents, a real number is a quantitative value of a continuous quantity that can represent a distance along a line. Within or outside the context of a real number is always a non-fictitious quantitative value. Quantitative value asserts that which can be operand. Quantitative is used because it implies the principles of counting. Math is the only discipline, when done correctly, can show you that you are wrong, as well as show you that you are correct. In my 2 cents, this property of math is what makes it concrete real, and as such is why it is always treated as an out-of-context non-fiction. All mathematical expressions are true unless they are statements of inequality, or that they are statements which are imaginary quantities. We will deal with imaginary sets and quantities later. Everything that Terrence Howard said was true. Everything. If you go back and watch the video and you answer his questions, if you take the time out to write his word questions out and show them as actual word questions, you will see that everything he said was true, while your subjective, emotional, biased mind allowed you to be led into believing that there was some phallus or misdirection being presented within the context of his statements. That's not a failure of the math. It's a failure of our ability to understand the math. And the failure of our ability to understand the math is a failure of our academic system, because the academic system was put into place to universally create a value of understanding between us. And because there doesn't exist universal values of understanding between us, there's always misunderstanding. The my 2 cents law of arithmetic, the 4 laws of arithmetic, the laws of operation, the associative law, the accumulative law, and the distribution laws. These laws are the law of operation, parentheses, exponents, root extraction, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. The associative law, for every addition, a plus b plus c equals a plus b plus c, with the parentheses dividing A and B and B and C. For multiplication, AB times C equals A times BC, again with parentheses. The commutative law, for addition, A plus B must equal B plus A. For multiplication, AB equals BA. That's the distribution law. The distribution law. A times B plus C in parentheses is equal to A times B plus A times C. The law of operations states the order in which operations are executed. The law of operations govern a non-fictitious interpretation of how a statement of equality is meant to be read. And this way, the subjective of writing or spoken statement of equality is non-existent, which is non-existent when the law of operations is adhered to and respected. Let me read that one more time. The law of operations states the order in which operations are executed. The law of operations governs the non-fictitious interpretation of how a statement of equality is meant to be read. In this way, the subjective of a writing or spoken statement of equality is non-existent when the law of operation is adhered to and respected. What Terrence Howard did was he interjected bias and subjected the laws of operation to a subjective, non-consistent ordering. You can reorder the order of operations as long as you stick to that with all principles. That means that if you say that I'm going to do addition and subtraction before multiplication and division, now you're in the realm of imaginary numbers, and it's going to work. You're going to get values that are going to be constant under that value. If you flip addition and subtraction before multiplication and division on one side, and you do the order operation on the other side, and you assign values of x, and you do math, you're going to get equalities, because that's the whole point of an equation. An equation is an unknown or known equality. That's what they're for. You either have values that you're trying to prove true, or you have values that you're trying to understand. That's it. That's all equations are for. Mathematical equations give credit to the principles of mathematics, because numbers don't need to be interpreted. There's only one Paul Emerson. Now, the instance of me as Paul Emerson, I exist as one. The instance of other Paul Emersons exist as themselves as one. I'll get into that in a minute. Let me just finish reading through this. And I'll probably put this video by itself without the Terrence Howard part. As an example, take the expression 2 plus 2 times 2, which equals 6, and the expression 2 times 2 plus 2 in parentheses. The correct way to handle this expression is to rewrite the expression as follows. 2 times 2 plus 2 times 2 equals 8. This is the foundation of understanding the my 2 cent math. Any changing or deviation from the laws of operation in the numbers are no longer non-fiction and real. The order of operation has been tested empirically and are a byproduct of the misinterpretation of the set aspect of numbers. The quantity 2 is the set of 1 plus 1. The quantity 4 is a set of 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, or the set 2 plus 2, etc. If 2 times 1 plus 1 in parentheses equals 2 times 1 plus 2 times 1, where 2 is equal to 1 plus 1, the equality can be written as 1 plus 1 times 1 plus 1 times 1 plus 1. And I think there should be an additional one. I think that's a typo. In essence, the parentheses embody the set aspect of a number. In algebra, you solve for x. 3 minus x equals 5. Whereas you rewrite the problem 3 plus 5 equals x. The misconception about algebra that makes it difficult is that the numerical characters 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 are all algebraic expressions of set quantities which have been defined, the only exception being the number 1. For example, the quantity 1 is equal to the numerical value it represents. The quantity 2 is one set that has the quantity 2 is one set that has two numerical quantities. The numerical character for 10 is one set of two sets which represent 10 numerical characters, i.e., we use 2 characters to express the value of 1 plus 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 1. But the intuitiveness goes even further. We also use the value of 1s and 10s to conserve space within the compactness of numerical sets. We use these 3 characters, sets 1, 0, 0, to describe 100 numerical equalities. 10 plus 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 10, which equals 100. All of these could only be possible as a real and non-fictitious expression if we obey the law of operations. For every place value, there is a set, and as long as the law of operation is obeyed, numbers can be described into infinity using only 9 numerical characters as the numerical characters to describe empirical nothingness. I'm sorry, it's a typo. For every place value, there is a set. As long as the laws of operation is obeyed, numbers can be described into infinity using only 9 numerical characters and 1 numerical character to describe empirical nothingness. The 1 numerical character used to describe empirical nothingness is 0. The characters 0 through 9 is 10 digits. So the Mitoussin mathematics is going to actually correlate directly into the Mitoussin geometry. The Mitoussin geometry, I'm still working on it because it's going to be an empirically real value geometry that is written with higher dimensions in mind. Remember when I said geometry is built on the influence of physical reality. So when they figured out the principles of a circle, they figured out the principles of a circle as it would apply to real world space. Because a circle doesn't exist. There is a circle right here, and there's a square here, and there's a triangle here, and there's a star in this area. Like, those principles for geometry are valid and true. Is there a circle in front of my face? No. Is there volume in front of my face that can describe a 2-dimensional circle? Yes. Is there volume in front of my face that can describe a 3-dimensional circle? Yes, a sphere. Is there volume in front of my face that can describe a 4th-dimensional hypersphere? We don't know. The short answer is no. No, nothing in our 3-dimensional volume can express 4-dimensional entities. But that doesn't mean that we are not 3-dimensional entities existing in a 4th-dimensional space. If that was true, then I could literally be creating hyperspheres and not even know it. Every time we create a sphere, it could actually have 4 dimensions to it, and we don't know it. Every time we draw a square on a sheet of paper, we could also be describing a cube in 4 dimensions and not even know it. The Mitoussin principles of geometry are supposed to actually handle that aspect of an applied geometry science, because I want to build like spaceships and stuff and hyperspace and all that. All that stuff. To me, all that stuff is interesting, fascinating, and fun, and we should have an applied science for it, even if it's just an applied theoretical science. I mean, there's no reason why we shouldn't do that. So that's pretty much it. In closing, what I will say is this. I'm still working out the language. What I've come up with is a circle is the Mitoussin definition of a circle is a line drawn parallel to any point. The distance from the point to any point on the line is the radius of that circle. A line which intersects 2 points on a circle while also intersecting the center of the circle is the diameter of that circle. A point is a boundless. I don't remember off the top of my head. Hold on, I might speed it up. Let me see if I can find it. You know what? Oh, here it is. Okay. In my 2 cents, a point is a boundless boundary. Its only property is that it may have locality from which it can be considered a zero-dimensional entity. Any dimensional boundary that has no compactness can be defined as a point. In essence, there are two classes of points. The first class point is a boundless point, which has no boundary. The second class is a boundary whose compactness is dimensionless or zero dimensions. The second class of point is defined as the smallest requirement of the existential property of locality, to include an analogy for temporal reality. And with that, I won't leave you there. I'll read the next paragraph. A boundless temporal point is non-causal time. A boundary of zero temporal is a locality that has zero time. If we consider the boundless as being a universal constant, a universal container, there is one part in space, one part in time, and other aspects can give rise to quantities that follow that line, and there can be I'll start over. A boundless temporal point is non-causal time. A boundary of zero temporal is a location that has zero time. If we consider the boundless as being a universal container, wherein one part is space, one part is time, and other aspects can give rise to qualities that follow this line of reason, then we need 2 degrees of freedom for one quantity of space and one quantity of time. If a boundlessness space occupies a boundlessness time, then time has to be boundaries. If a boundless time is occupied by a boundless space, then space has to be a boundary. The subjective nature of this is built on the parent-child relationship of the my 2 cent definition. And with that ungrammatically written, when I'm writing these principles, I'm thinking to myself, is this statement an axiom, or is this statement going to be subjective to interpretation? And as I go through that process of deleting words and adding words and deleting words, the grammar falls apart. I have to go back in and take out extra words. There might be 2 does or whatever. So I haven't actually done that component yet, which is why it takes so long for me to do everything. With that being said, my name is Paul Emerson, and I have just given you my 2 cents.